I came home without calling first and heard my daughter-in-law speaking to my disabled son. Your mother makes me sick, Ethan. I can't stand that old woman anymore. In that moment, I realized I had raised a snake right inside my own nest. My name is Barbara Collins. I'm 62 years old, living in Seattle, and I never thought I would live to hear my own daughter-in-law tell my son that I disgusted her. I stood frozen at the doorway of my own apartment, still holding the homemade chocolate birthday cake as her words cut through me like knives. That night was the eve of Ethan's birthday. My only son, the one who had lost the ability to walk after a terrible car accident a year earlier. I had gotten up at 5 a.m. to bake the cake he had loved since childhood, a recipe passed down from my mother. I only wanted to surprise him, to show up early and see that rare smile I hadn't seen in months. I unlocked the door with my own key. As always, after all, it was still my son's home. But as I approached the living room, I heard Olivia's voice cold and sharp as ice. It wasn't the sweet tone she'd used for the past 5 years. Now it was filled with contempt, spilling words no mother should ever have to hear. She was telling Ethan, who had already suffered enough, that I made her sick, that my presence ruined their life together. Each word struck my heart like a blade, aimed straight at the son I had raised alone after my husband Richard died of heart disease. I stood there, stiff, clutching the cake made with all my love, feeling my world crumble around me. 5 years, all of it had been a lie. The woman I once considered a daughter, the one who ate dinner with me every Sunday, the one I helped pick her wedding dress, was now destroying my son's spirit with her cruelty. But what hurt the most was Ethan's stunned face. He looked completely shocked, as if it were the first time he had ever heard those words. He tried to interrupt, saying something about respect, but Olivia didn't stop. Her voice poured venom, every sentence slicing through the air. Right then, I realized my son was also a victim of that woman's cruelty. My mind drifted back to the past, the years I worked endlessly in Seattle. Sewing, cleaning houses, babysitting, just to support my boy after Richard passed away. I had thought all my sacrifices were worth it when Ethan met Olivia. She had seemed kind, attentive, gentle toward my son. During their 2-year relationship, she often visited my home, helped me cook, said she wanted to learn our family recipes. I truly believed I had gained another daughter. Their wedding day was the happiest day of my life, second only to the day Ethan graduated from college. Seeing him in his black suit, beaming beside the woman he loved, I felt every hardship had been worth it. My son had a good career, a software engineer at a tech company, and a beautiful wife. But then, one December afternoon, everything changed. A truck lost its brakes on the highway, and the crash left Ethan paralyzed from the waist down. For 3 months, I practically lived at the hospital. Olivia showed up only occasionally, always dressed up, perfectly made up, saying she couldn't stand to see her husband. Like that. I understood her shock, but I hoped she would learn to adapt. When Ethan was discharged, I temporarily moved into their apartment in West Hills to help him adjust. We had to remodel the entire place, build ramps, add an accessible bathroom, and install rehab equipment. Ethan fell into deep depression. Understandable for a 38-year-old man who had lost his mobility. That's when we hired Alex, a 43-year-old caregiver, friendly and seemingly dedicated. Ethan liked him right away, saying it felt good to talk to another man again. I was relieved, thinking it might help him heal emotionally. But soon, I noticed Olivia changing. The same woman who used to complain about caring for her husband now started dressing up more when Alex came by, wearing more revealing clothes, heavy perfume, and finding excuses to linger and chat with him in the living room. After a few months, Olivia told me that my presence made Ethan too dependent, and she suggested I let them handle things on their own. I thought maybe she was right, they needed space. so I decided to visit only on weekends. But every time I came by, I saw Ethan growing quieter, sadder. When I asked what was wrong, he'd only say, "Don't worry, Mom." But his eyes told a different story. Olivia still acted polite, but I could feel the falseness in every smile. And today, as I stood at the doorway hearing her venomous words, I realized my instincts had been right all along. The woman I once treated like my own daughter was poisoning my son's mind, despising the very mother who had sacrificed everything for him. Still holding the birthday cake in my hands, I understood that my family had turned into a nest of vipers. But I didn't know those words were only the beginning, because what I was about to discover about Olivia and Alex in the days to come would make even a strong mother like me question the goodness of humanity. At that moment, standing there frozen as my world collapsed, one thought echoed in my mind. How could I have been so blind? I set the birthday cake on the table by the door and walked out of the apartment as if escaping a fire. My head throbbed, my heart pounded, and a storm of anger and humiliation made it hard to breathe. How could a mother endure, realizing that the woman she treated like her own child despised her so deeply? I went home, unable to do anything the rest of the day. I just sat in my chair, staring at the wall, replaying every cruel word Olivia had said. Her voice was cold and dripping with contempt, as if I were a shameful burden in their lives. And the image of Ethan, sitting silently, trying to stop his wife, made my heart ache. That evening, the phone rang. It was Ethan. His voice was trembling, full of shame. He said he needed to talk to me, that something serious had happened. He asked if I could come back to the apartment since Olivia had gone to her mother's after a terrible argument. When I arrived, Ethan sat in his wheelchair in the middle of the living room, his eyes red and tired. The birthday cake I had brought was still untouched on the table, like a wound that refused to heal. The way he looked at me that night, hurt, ashamed, yet somehow relieved, I will never forget. He told me that Olivia had completely changed after the accident. She constantly complained, saying she didn't marry a man just to be a nurse for a cripple, that her life was basically over. She used emotional blackmail, threatening that if Ethan told me anything, she would leave him and he'd be alone forever. She even said no woman would want to live with a man in a wheelchair, that he should be grateful she was still around. Those words poisoned my son's spirit day after day, eating away at his already fragile self-worth. But what chilled me to the bone was when Ethan mentioned Alex, the caregiver. He said he had seen Olivia and Alex whispering, sharing strange looks, even touching each other too familiarly. When he confronted her, Olivia just smirked and said, "You're paranoid. Maybe you should see a therapist." He told me he felt like a prisoner in his own home. Olivia controlled everything, his medication, his therapy schedule, even fired a nurse he liked, claiming she was stealing. Bit by bit, she cut him off from everyone, including me. That night, my son and I cried in each other's arms for the first time since the accident. I felt his pain, as if it were my own. I had sensed something was wrong, but I never imagined it was this cruel. Olivia wasn't just cold. She was destroying my son's spirit piece by piece. Ethan apologized for not having the courage to tell me sooner. He said he was ashamed, that maybe Olivia was right that he was a burden. My heart shattered hearing those words. A man once strong, brilliant, and successful at a major company had been reduced to self-loathing because of one cruel woman. I stayed the night, sleeping on the couch, my heart heavy. The next morning, Olivia returned. When she saw me, she froze, then quickly put on that fake sweet daughter-in-law smile again. But it was too late. I looked her straight in the eye and told her I had heard everything. She tried to explain, said she was just angry, that I'd misunderstood, that she was under a lot of stress. Then she started crying, pretending to be the victim, saying things were hard for her too, that sometimes she said things she didn't mean. She spoke as if her pain outweighed my son's, but this time, I didn't believe a single word. I told her Ethan had told me everything: the insults, the manipulation, the threats to abandon him. I saw the fear flash in her eyes as she realized she had lost control. And then, Olivia's mask finally fell. She stopped crying, looked straight at me with eyes cold as steel, and said, "You have no idea what it's like to take care of a crippled man. You just show up on weekends to play the part of the loving mother." She kept spewing her venom, calling me an old woman who can't mind her own business, saying I couldn't accept that my son was an adult, that I was destroying their marriage, and that I should learn my place. Every word cut into my heart like a knife. But this time, I was no longer the gentle, submissive mother. The truth I had learned the night before awakened the strength of a mother willing to protect her son from predators. I looked straight at Olivia and said calmly, "You're wrong if you think you can keep tormenting my son. I had worked my whole life to give him a decent life, and I would not let a greedy, cruel woman destroy it all." My voice was firm, so strong that even Olivia froze for a second. She forced a mocking laugh and said, "You have no say in this marriage. Ethan is my husband, not your little boy. You'd better learn to accept that." But she had no idea that a plan had already begun forming in my mind, one she would never see coming. I left that apartment that day with one conviction: my sons and my life were about to change forever. I would no longer stand by and watch that woman manipulate and humiliate Ethan. I would no longer pretend to be blind to the truth happening right before my eyes. In the days that followed, I began to investigate quietly. I looked into their finances and found that the apartment they lived in was owned by the company where Ethan worked, a benefit reserved for senior managers. My small house in the suburbs of Seattle, which I owned outright, had increased in value significantly as the neighborhood developed. I also began paying attention to Alex's schedule and habits. I often stopped by the apartment at different hours, always with an excuse so as not to raise suspicion. And soon, I noticed things that confirmed Ethan's instincts completely. Alex often arrived earlier than scheduled, stayed later, and had private conversations with Olivia. A week later, the worst happened. I planned to drive Ethan to a doctor's appointment, but that day I arrived an hour early because traffic was light. I unlocked the door with my own key, and what I saw in the living room made me freeze. Olivia was in Alex's arms, the two of them kissing passionately with a fire she had never shown my son. They were so lost in each other that they didn't even notice I was there. That was the final proof my son was being betrayed in the cruelest way imaginable. I left quickly, but inside me burned a determination that nothing could shake. I would not let those two destroy Ethan's life or steal what he had worked so hard to build. They had chosen the wrong person to cross a mother, ready to do whatever it took to protect her son. That day, I made the bravest decision of my life. It was time to show them the true strength of a 62-year-old woman who had raised her son alone and had no idea how to be afraid. The battle had only begun, and they had no clue what was coming. The image of those two embracing haunted me for days. I carried a weight in my chest like a stone, knowing my son was being betrayed in the most despicable way. Olivia and Alex had no idea I had seen everything. They continued their perfect act, pretending to be the devoted wife and the professional caregiver. But I was no longer the naive mother. I began to watch everything differently. The times Alex arrived and left, the way Olivia dressed when he was around, the glances they exchanged when they thought no one was watching. It all filled me with rage, the way they underestimated everyone's intelligence. Then, one Thursday, things got even worse. I drove Ethan to physical therapy, and on the way back, we stopped by the bank. While waiting in line, Ethan told me he was worried about money. He said Olivia kept claiming their expenses were too high, and urged him to quit his job and live off his disability benefits. That statement instantly set off alarms in my head. Ethan was still receiving his full management salary from the company after the accident, a special arrangement. So why would Olivia want him to give up that steady income? Unless she was plotting something far worse than I'd imagined. That night, I called Nancy, my close friend who had worked at a law office for over 20 years. I told her everything from the insults to the affair between Olivia and Alex. Nancy was furious and gave me advice that completely changed how I saw the situation. She told me I needed to document every piece of evidence, because in cases like this, predators often target the assets of the disabled. Nancy advised me to check whether Olivia was trying to obtain power of attorney or if there were unusual withdrawals from Ethan's bank account. That advice was a wake-up call. The next morning, I asked Ethan to show me his bank statements. What I found made my blood boil. Over the past 6 months, there were large withdrawals, always at the times Ethan was at therapy or doctor appointments. When I asked, Ethan said, Olivia told him it was for household expenses and medications, but the amounts didn't add up. The withdrawals were far too large to be ordinary spending. Clearly, she was stealing my son's money, taking advantage of his trust to siphon everything he had. That was when I decided to act. I arranged to meet Ethan at the bank, using the pretext that I wanted to help him organize his finances. At the meeting, we discovered something even more shocking. Olivia had twice tried to add her name to Ethan's account, but the bank had refused because both account holders had to be present. Ethan went pale. She had never mentioned this to him. We left the bank in total silence. Ethan was shattered. He finally understood that his wife was not only cruel with words, but was trying to take his assets. In the car, he cried like a child, bewildered that he had married someone so greedy. That night, we talked until dawn. Ethan told me that over the past months, several of his valuables had gone missing. A Rolex watch, a gold chain he'd received from the company, and some expensive electronics. When he asked, Olivia said she'd sent them for repair or put them in a safe place. Ethan also said Olivia pressured him to make a will, claiming a wife has legal rights and that it was better to have things documented to avoid family trouble. Each revelation felt like a knife to my heart. During that conversation, I made the most important decision of my life. I would not accept this any longer. My son deserved dignity and respect. The accident had taken Ethan's legs, but no one had the right to take his dignity. I would do everything I could to get him out of the hell Olivia had created. The following weekend, I went to their Seattle apartment earlier than usual, bringing ingredients to make his favorite stew and apple pie. Olivia seemed annoyed, but couldn't refuse without revealing her act. As I cooked, I noticed every detail in the apartment. A brand new TV I'd never seen before, glittering jewelry at Olivia's throat, designer clothes strewn across the sofa, all clearly bought with Ethan's money, while she complained that the cost of living is so high. Alex, the caregiver, arrived on schedule, but this time I was prepared. Ethan and I had agreed he would pretend to be asleep so I could watch how they behaved together. What I saw confirmed my worst suspicions. They acted like lovers' looks, intimate gestures, touches delicate but unmistakable. When Olivia went out to shop, I started a conversation with Alex, pretending to worry about Ethan's spirits. He spoke about the difficulties of caring for a disabled person, but the way he spoke lacked respect and warmth, as if Ethan were merely a burdensome job standing in the way of what he really wanted. And when I mentioned Olivia, his eyes lit up, confirming every fear I had tried to deny. That afternoon, I called Nancy and told her everything. Nancy explained abandonment of support, misappropriation of assets, and how the law can protect vulnerable people. But she emphasized I needed concrete proof. I decided to hire a private detective. Nancy referred me to a discreet, professional investigator experienced in affairs and asset fraud. I told him everything about Olivia, Alex, missing money, betrayal, and asked him to document their activities when they thought no one was watching. While waiting for the report, I prepared my own plan. I had my old house in Oregon appraised and learned its value had tripled over more than 20 years. The broker said it could sell for nearly $1 million. I realized I was holding an ace in the hole. I also began looking for a small house on the California coast where Ethan and I could start over, far from those who would harm us. I found a beautiful place, a seaside house in Santa Barbara, peaceful and warm, with a private ramp for a wheelchair, exactly the kind of home Ethan had dreamed of his whole life. 2 weeks later, the detective handed me the report, and the nightmare became real. Olivia and Alex had been meeting regularly at a motel on the outskirts of town, right during the hours when Ethan was at therapy. Worse yet, Alex had opened a new bank account and was receiving steady deposits that matched the withdrawals from Ethan's account. Even more horrifying, they were planning a future together. The detective had recorded a video in which Olivia said, "Pretty soon, I'll be a rich widow, and I'll live the life I deserve." Hearing that, I felt sick to my stomach. The cold way she spoke about my son, as if his death would be her freedom, made me tremble with rage. That night, looking at the photos and evidence in my hands, I knew I wouldn't just expose them. I would make them lose everything. My revenge would be quiet, legal, and absolutely devastating. Holding that thick file of evidence, I stayed awake 3 nights straight, planning every step. It wasn't just a mother's anger anymore, it was the hunger for justice from a woman who had been underestimated for far too long. On Monday morning, I sold the house in Oregon, the one I had bought with my late husband Richard's life insurance money after he passed away. I had spent nearly all of that money back then to build a safe home for my time, son and me. And now, after more than 25 years, it had become my strongest weapon. The realtor was surprised by my urgency, but when I said it was a family matter, he sped up the process. In just 48 hours, I had 3 serious offers, all close to the appraised value. During that time, Ethan and I went to the notary's office to sign a legal power of attorney, giving me full control over his bank accounts. I told him it was just a precaution, in case of an emergency. Ethan signed without hesitation. He trusted me completely. And that document would become the key to everything I was about to do. Nancy introduced me to a lawyer who specialized in marriage and asset cases, Robert Hayes. About 50 years old, serious but sharp. When I told him the whole story and showed him the photos, statements, recordings, and the investigator's report, he just shook his head. "I've seen cases like this too many times," he said. "People exploiting the disabled, stealing their assets they usually have help. But this time, you've got enough evidence to take them both down." Mr. Hayes proposed a bold but legal plan. I would sell the house, transfer all the money into a new account under my name, and file for divorce on Ethan's behalf, accusing Olivia of neglect, infidelity, and financial exploitation. By the time Olivia realized what was happening, it would be too late. Ethan and I would disappear from Seattle, taking with us all the finances she had relied on. If she dared to countersue, she'd have to explain to the court where the stolen money came from and her affair with Alex. It would be a battle Olivia couldn't possibly win. A week later, I got a call from the realtor. "Mrs. Barbara, we've sold your house for $1 million. The buyer wants to sign the papers next Monday." I knew there was no turning back. Everything was ready. I called Mr. Hayes, and he said just one sentence. "It's time to show them, Mrs. Barbara, the true strength of a mother." Hayes told me he had prepared all the divorce papers, along with an emergency protection order proving Ethan was a victim of emotional abuse and financial exploitation. Everything would be filed on Tuesday, right after the house sale was finalized. That weekend, I spent more time than usual with my son. I took Ethan to his favorite places and cooked his favorite meals: creamy corn chowder and crisp baked apple pie. We talked about the future, about a new life, but deep down, I knew it was our silent goodbye to Seattle and to an entire lifetime of memories. Olivia was unusually cheerful. She said she wanted to redecorate next week, maybe even take a little trip with Alex to clear her head. Every word she said only confirmed that I was doing the right thing. On Sunday night, I sat with Ethan on the apartment balcony. I told him part of the plan, that I had sold the house in Oregon, and I wanted us to start over somewhere new, far away from everything that had been hurting him. Ethan went silent, then cried out of relief. He said that for months he had wished to leave but didn't know how. He felt like a prisoner in his own toxic marriage. When he realized I had found a way out, he hugged me tightly, a hug I hadn't felt from him since he was a little boy. We agreed that on Monday morning, after I signed the papers to sell the house, Ethan would pretend to go to therapy as usual, but in truth, we would head straight to the airport. I had already bought the tickets, rented a specialized transport van, and prepared everything so the trip would be quick and final. Following Attorney Hayes's advice, I would leave a letter explaining why we were leaving, along with copies of all the evidence proving Olivia and Alex's wrongdoing. No accusations, no drama, just the bare truth, clearly written, so they would understand that the game had, I've been turned upside down. Early Monday morning, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how our lives were about to change forever. For the first time in years, I felt a real spark of hope, a sense that brighter days were finally near. When the sun rose, I knew that by the end of that day, we would be free. Free from Olivia, from Alex, from the hell they had turned my son's life into. The sweetest revenge isn't yelling or cursing, it's disappearing in silence, taking with you everything they thought they could steal. That morning was bright and golden, as if the entire sky approved of my plan. I got up at 5 a.m., my heart racing, yet inside me was an unfamiliar calm. Today would be the turning point, the day our lives changed forever. By 9 a.m., I was at the notary's office in Seattle, signing the house sale papers. The full $1 million was immediately transferred into the new account I had created for this plan. As I walked out, I felt a bittersweet mix of sadness and relief. I had let go of the home where I'd raised my son, but I had also unlocked our freedom. I drove straight to Ethan's apartment. Olivia was doing her makeup, picking out a dress, happily chatting about meeting her friends for lunch. She had no idea that this would be the last day she'd ever see me as the quiet, compliant mother-in-law. By the time she returned that evening, she would face a completely different reality. I told her I was taking Ethan to therapy and would stop by the bank afterward to handle a few things. Olivia barely looked up, too busy choosing the right pair of shoes, probably to meet Alex under the excuse of a social visit. Ethan looked tense, but his eyes were full of determination. On the way to the airport, he held my hand tightly, just like when he was a little boy, frightened of thunder. We didn't say much, but we both knew this was the most important thing we would ever do. We were leaving behind an entire life to start again from nothing. Everything at the airport went perfectly. The transport van worked smoothly, and Ethan boarded the plane without a problem. 2 hours later, we were flying toward California. My son looked out the window, his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years: true hope. As the plane glided through white clouds, I imagined Olivia coming home to find the apartment empty. Attorney Hayes had promised to file the divorce papers right at 5 p.m., the exact time she usually returned from her social outings. That shock would shatter the fake world she had built for herself. On the living room table, I left a letter explaining everything. The months of emotional abuse Ethan endured, Olivia's betrayal, the unauthorized withdrawals, all backed by photos, statements, and clear evidence. Inside the envelope was also a copy of the legal power of attorney revoking all her access to Ethan's accounts. When we landed in California in the late afternoon, the rental car was already waiting. Just an hour later, we arrived at the small seaside house in Santa Barbara, the one I had rented ahead of time. It was small but full of light, filled with ocean breeze and peace. When Ethan saw the ocean for the first time in years, he broke down in tears. That night, we sat on the porch, listening to the steady rhythm of the waves. Ethan held my hand and thanked me for having the courage to pull him out of that nightmare. He said that for months he had felt like he was dying inside, poisoned by the very person who was supposed to love and protect him. I squeezed his hand, looked out at the ocean, and knew we were finally free. All night, my phone kept ringing. It was Olivia calling. She must have gone mad realizing we were gone. I didn't answer. After all those years of endurance, I didn't owe her a single word. The next morning, Attorney Hayes called with an update. Olivia had stormed into his office, furious and threatening to sue everyone involved. But when he showed her the evidence of adultery, fraud, and theft, her face turned pale. He said if she dared to fight back, she'd be facing criminal charges. As for Alex, he vanished completely. Once he realized the truth had come out, he ran, probably taking with him the money he had stolen all along. Olivia was left to face the consequences of everything she had done alone. In those first few weeks in Santa Barbara, Ethan changed noticeably. The fresh air, the sound of the ocean, and the peace around us helped him heal and regain confidence. He started smiling more, talking about the future, dreaming of opening a small workshop by the beach. And as for me, I felt reborn. Every morning, I make coffee, sit and watch the sun rise over the Pacific Ocean, and hear the friendly greetings of my neighbors. Life is simple, but it's full of freedom and dignity. 3 months later, Attorney Hayes brought good news. The court had officially finalized the divorce. Olivia couldn't fight back. The evidence was clear and undeniable. For the first time in years, I knew that justice was finally on our side. She was ordered to repay all the money she had stolen. But since Alex had taken part of it, and she had spent the rest, Olivia would be in debt for many years to come. Around that time, we met Dr. Frank Miller, a retired physician who had moved to Santa Barbara after decades of work in Los Angeles. He took an interest in Ethan's story and began visiting often, not as a doctor, but as a genuine friend. That friendship played a crucial role in my son's emotional recovery. Dr. Miller told us that this seaside community still lacked many essentials: a small medical clinic, a playground for children, activities for the elderly. When he learned that I had worked as an administrative manager and Ethan was a mechanical engineer, he suggested that we start a community association. The idea thrilled me. After years of being only a mother and a mother-in-law, I felt alive again, able to contribute to something greater than myself. We started small, hosting meetings at home, learning about local needs, connecting with city officials and local businesses. Ethan joined with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen since before the accident. He used his engineering skills to design infrastructure projects focused on accessibility and sustainability. Seeing my son regain his sense of purpose was the most precious reward of all. Within 6 months, we had secured a small space for the community center, modest but complete. A free health clinic, a small classroom for teenagers, and an outdoor playground for neighborhood kids. Ethan taught math and basic science to students, while I managed administration and fundraising. 10 months after arriving in California, as I looked back on all we had built, I realized something profound. Olivia's betrayal had been a blessing in disguise. If she hadn't revealed her true nature, we might never have discovered our own strength to start over. Now, as I share this story, I no longer feel hatred toward Olivia or Alex. I only feel pity. They lost the chance to be part of a real family, one where love and kindness matter more than money. The sweetest revenge is simply living well, proving that we don't need them to survive. As I write these words, I'm sitting on the porch, watching Ethan teach children to play guitar on the beach in Santa Barbara. My son discovered a hidden musical talent and became a volunteer teacher for the community center. What began as a small dream has now helped over 50 families in the area. We have a free clinic where Dr. Miller volunteers 3 times a week, a community library filled with donated books from across America, and craft workshops that help local women earn extra income. But what makes me proudest is the music school Ethan founded. It all started when a neighborhood child grew curious about the guitar Ethan often played on the porch. From that moment, he began teaching and found joy in sharing music. Now, 23 children study music at the center. Some have performed at local festivals, earning their first money through their own talent. Watching my son not only regain his self-respect but also find new meaning in life has been the greatest reward for everything I, Barbara Collins, 62 years old, fought for. Ethan, who once believed he was a burden, has now become the emotional anchor of an entire community. Children adore him, parents respect him, and he finally lives as someone truly valuable. Something he once thought was impossible. Our life is simple now, but full of meaning. I wake up every morning at 6 a.m., listen to the waves, sip a warm cup of coffee, and watch the sunrise over the Santa Barbara shore. Then I walk to the community center to organize the day's work. Ethan teaches music in the morning, and in the afternoon he assists Dr. Frank Miller with projects to improve coastal infrastructure. In the evening, we share dinner together and talk about future plans, a nursing home for the elderly, a literacy program for adults, and the idea of inviting medical specialists from Los Angeles for regular checkups. Those are big dreams, but we've learned that with perseverance and unity, nothing is impossible. The money from selling our old house in Oregon became the foundation for everything. We bought our new home with cash, invested part of the remainder in secure funds to ensure a peaceful old age, and used most of it to finance community projects. It's money being used in the best way possible, changing lives and creating a legacy far greater than the two of us. The relationship between Ethan and me changed completely. We were no longer just mother and son, we were teammates in the same mission. Ethan sought my opinion on every important decision, and I trusted and supported him wholeheartedly. We became a perfect team, as if the tragedy with Olivia had only made us stronger and more connected than ever. As for Olivia, through attorney Hayes, I learned she had tried several times to make contact. He also said that Alex had been arrested 6 months after we left for repeating his old scam, exploiting people with disabilities to steal their assets. He was caught, a satisfying feeling, but hardly a surprise. People like him only stop when they're behind bars. Olivia, I heard, now lives in a small rented apartment on the outskirts of Los Angeles and has probably learned the hardest lesson of her life. Those who live by exploiting others always end up alone. I no longer feel anger toward her, only a deep sadness thinking about how she lost the chance to be part of a family that truly loved her. Not long after, a few friends from Seattle came to visit. Nancy stayed with us for a week and was amazed at how much we had changed. She said she had never seen me so peaceful and fulfilled. Some of Ethan's former colleagues also visited. They were moved to see my son healthy, confident, and happier than ever. But the visit that touched me the most was from Mr. David Collins, the bank director where Ethan used to work. He flew from Seattle to California just to invite Ethan to consult on a social project the bank was developing along the West Coast. I was proud to see my son's professional expertise still valued, even after all the pain and despair he had endured. Ethan agreed to take the part-time position, helping to develop sustainable and inclusive projects for underprivileged communities. It was work he could do from home, applying his engineering skills to create real-world solutions. That extra income allowed us to expand several new initiatives for the community center. If Olivia had never shown her true face, we might still be stuck in Seattle. Ethan's still full of self-doubt and hopelessness, and I still an overprotective mother. And perhaps hundreds of people in this community would never have received the help and hope we now share. In a way, Olivia was the very tool fate used to bring us exactly where we were meant to be. Of course, there are still difficult moments. Sometimes Ethan grows tired of the wheelchair, and sometimes I miss the convenience of our old life in Seattle. But those moments pass quickly, because when I look around at everything we've built together, I feel nothing but peace and gratitude. Tonight, when Ethan returns from the beach with his students, we'll have dinner on the porch as we always do. We'll talk about tomorrow's plans, about dreams still waiting to be fulfilled, and about a life richer in meaning than any amount of money could ever buy. And when I look out at the night sea shimmering with stars, I'll silently thank God for giving me the courage to walk away from a life that seemed safe but was quietly destroying our souls. Because sometimes, to find true happiness, we must have the courage to lose everything we once thought mattered. My name is Barbara Collins. I'm 62 years old, and today I can say with absolute certainty this story was never about $1 million house. It was about the courage to begin again when life shows you that you deserve far more than what you've been settling for. And once that courage awakens, it stays with you forever. The story of Barbara and Ethan is a fictionalized account based on true events, with names and locations changed to protect the characters' identities. But the emotions, the pain, the courage, and the love are entirely real. Many mothers like Barbara have endured in silence, afraid of losing what they love most. But what about you in that situation? Would you stay silent for the sake of peace, or speak up to protect someone you love? Whatever your choice, God always sees your heart and blesses those who live with honesty, courage, and kindness. Thank you for sharing this story with us. Keep believing that light always follows darkness. At the end of the video, we invite you to watch 2 of the channel's most loved stories where wounded hearts find faith and healing again.